Terrific. Hi, I'm Mark Healy from 6 Degrees Architects, and I'm here to tell you the story of Escala. In 2014, we were approached by the MAD Corporation to go into a limited competition for a new tower in the Docklands. We were successful in the comp, and so began the journey that led to this building that became known as Escala. Escala's 19 levels of 178 apartments, 2,500 square metres of commercial and retail. It occupies a full block in the Docklands, and this is the main idea for this project, bringing the city to the Docklands. And it underpins a lot of the decisions that followed from there. There are an awful lot of ideas in this project. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll try to get through the critical ones. The site's in NewQuay, which is that northern area of the Docklands. It's an irregular shaped island site. It was pitched to us as developer product. It's not on the promenade, it's not on the water, it's one back in, it's kind of built up and sort of built around. But there were some really good opportunities, we thought, to pick up great solar access and some view opportunities to the city and the water. So, this was the flavour of the Docklands at the time. And this is what we wanted to do. And, the architectural devices to try and achieve bringing the city to the Docklands is what we've tried. So that's the built project. This is an overlay of the ground plane. So up is north. And the main strategy was to present the podium as a series of discrete buildings, individual kind of architectural buildings. It's look, if you take a chunk of a good city block with a lot of life and kind of transplant it, then you have things built at different times, eras, different materiality, scale, orientation, lots of components. So that's how we approached the podium. We also drove an east-west lane through that's open to the sky. A lot of reasons why lanes work and add vitality to the city. And on the northeast corner, we gave back some more space for a square or a piazza that could kind of use design lines and get a bit of activity into that area, and kind of, we talk about compression and kind of getting a bit of a buzz going with humans. This is the first building that presents to Docklands Drive. It's a standalone commercial building, office with retail down below. That's the kind of entry to it. As you move around the site, this is the square where things become much more at a pedestrian scale. Things come down, it's lowered. There's different kind of tactility and an understanding of scaling that's much more, it's tighter and more refined. This is a view through that east-west lane. There's a lot going on there, but you can see where we've applied texture and craft down at that ground level. There's quite distinct things happening here in that lane. As you move around, this is the first sort of standalone apartment building. You move further, a different kind of building takes the corner. Even where we've got substations and meter rooms, we're trying to present them in a way that's scaled as at the pedestrian level. The last corner you turn, it's a concrete panel and breeze block building, and that gives you a little idea of that idea of diversity and streetscape in the podium, and even further expressed down at ground level. That's from the breeze block building to a smaller simple curtain wall building that's a part of the office. And we're back to the laneway. And even in the laneway, there's things about the cities. If you look at our Victorian history of Melbourne, you've got, decorative buildings that front the street. Around the sides, they're decorative, but when you get to the back, it's stripped. There's no detail. It's full of sewer stacks and services. And in a little way, we were following and working with that. We had to be careful with budget because of, the cost and what we were set up to produce. These elevations just show you, detail is quite granular down at the ground, and in the podium, and then the tower itself is a reasonably quiet curtain wall. It's how we allocate resources and budget. Okay, there's a lot of craft and tactility in the foyers. We've been using fine kind of steel frame windows, stained glass work, artists with ceramics for decades. And we took those same people and took them to scale, from smaller stuff up to 100 million, like a project like this. And it was a really interesting process and, it kind of worked. This slide's a little bit just to describe something we talk about in the office, which is kind of bandwidth. When you're given a sort of limited budget, the detail you need to be specific. We were okay about having the core as an exposed concrete straight off the jump form, 19 stories of it. Leave the ceilings concrete, leave the structural columns concrete. That's okay, but we can kind of counterpoint it or stretch that bandwidth by having things like the glasswork. How many minutes is that?
You've got two.
Two. All right, so there's fine objects like the marble bench, the glass, but you've also got like finely machined things like the stainless, the door surrounds, and the lift, but also the buttons, and that mechanism is just pretty raw and exposed. The tower's a T-shaped form that gave us great opportunities for corners. The corridors are all lit. The language is quite subdued in the resi, and the plans themselves, they're great. They passed the 6 degrees test. Would I live in it? They're not going to change the world. It was done pre-bads, but they're all really furnishable. They kind of, they work, and there's a bit of generosity in them. We tried to use natural materials where possible and have smaller elements of detail, like those kind of tiles and the hardwood. And the interesting thing about the resi, it's mostly what we call lofts. So they're multi-level apartments. That little stained glass, there's a little bit of that in every apartment in the bathrooms. This is a cutaway section that just shows this is a 4-level loft. There's 3s, 2s. The whole building is made up of interlinked lofts. It was a bit of a nightmare to draw and build, but it kind of ran out the door in terms of sales. There's also there's, a pool, rooftop garden, there's a library, gym, and the rest of it. And down at ground, there's an EOT. And even this, in a little way, is part of the language of, the bluestone runs from the footpath through this lane into the foyers. There's raw core on the right. There's raw Besser-Bleak brick. But there's kind of, the finer glass work and the steel frame window. But we've still got exposed services and conduits. So that concept of kind of bandwidth and kind of a bit of honesty in the expression is kind of consistent through the project. Anyway, that is the story of Escala.